The morning my son flew to Hawaii without me, the house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming and my own heart beating. My suitcase was still standing by the door, little purple tag swinging like it was waiting to be chosen. On my phone, a bright picture flashed across the screen. My son Mark, his wife Jenna, and my granddaughter Emma, all three of them grinning in front of the gate sign that said Honolulu. The caption read, "Finally, our dream family vacation." They looked happy. I stared at the picture for a long time until the letters on the screen blurred and my eyes stung. I wiped my glasses on the edge of my sweater, even though I knew it wasn't the lenses that were fogged up. 2 weeks earlier, at my kitchen table, that same phone had lit up with a very different message. "Mom," Mark had said, shifting in his chair the way he used to when he was a boy caught lying about homework. "So, about the Hawaii trip." I remember the time on the microwave, 8:47 p.m. The blue digits glowed over a sink full of Emma's tiny cereal bowls that I'd washed and stacked one by one after watching her while they caught up on work and grabbed dinner with clients. My electric bill, folded and half paid, sat under the salt shaker, waiting for the rest of the check that would clear after my small pension came in. The trip confirmation email was printed and tucked into a clear plastic folder I kept in a wicker basket by the fridge, right with my medical receipts and the house insurance policy. I had paid for more than half of that trip with the life insurance from my husband, Walter. He'd wanted us to see the ocean together, but cancer took that from us. So, when Mark mentioned the family deal for flights and the early bird hotel discount, I offered, without him asking, to help. I said it was what his father would have wanted. I said it would be nice to have one big memory together. He'd kissed my forehead and called me the best mom. That was before his wife's voice cut through my kitchen like a cold wind. "It's just, you'd be a burden, Mary," Jenna said, fingers wrapped around the mug of coffee I made her, even though she'd brought one from the drive-thru. She didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes were on the notification popping up on her smartwatch. "Travel is hard at your age. The layovers, the walking. We don't want you to overexert yourself." A burden. Funny how one word can make 66 years of your life fold in on itself like a cheap lawn chair. I sat very still. I remember the exact pattern of the tablecloth under my hands, tiny yellow lemons on blue squares, faded from years of washing. Walter used to say that cloth looked like summer even in January. I stared at one of the lemons while my son cleared his throat. "Jenna just means," he added too quickly, "we want you to be comfortable, Mom. Hawaii it's a lot of walking and the time difference and all. And you get tired. You've said so yourself." I thought of the nights I'd kept Emma while Jenna worked late, rocking that baby through colic and fevers, the way my own mother taught me. I thought of the afternoons I'd driven across town in my old Buick to pick her up from daycare when they had a last-minute meeting, paying for gas with crumpled bills from a jar I kept behind the flour. I thought of the mortgage statement where my name and Mark's were side by side because I'd co-signed when the bank said his credit wasn't strong enough. Tired? Yes, but not from living. My voice, when it came out, sounded like it belonged to someone older than I felt. "I thought the tickets were already booked," I said. "The confirmation email said 4 passengers. I printed it. It's in the basket." Jenna finally looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something almost like panic in her eyes. She glanced at Mark, quick and sharp, a look that had more words than their lips ever said out loud. "They were," Mark said. "But, we called the airline, used the travel credits, moved things around. We'll take you somewhere closer next time, maybe Florida. Fewer hours in the air, easier." My fingers tightened around my teacup. The ceramic was chipped on the rim, a little bite taken out from when Emma knocked it off the counter last Christmas. I'd glued it back together myself. I see, I whispered. Jenna exhaled, relieved, as if something heavy had been lifted off her shoulders. They left not long after that. There were hugs, awkward and quick. Emma bounced around my living room, excited about beaches and volcanoes, asking if there'd be turtles. I hugged that little girl and breathed in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, memorizing it. She was the only innocent one in the room. After they drove off, tail lights disappearing down the quiet suburban street, I went to the wicker basket. The confirmation email was still there in its plastic sleeve, my name printed clearly. Mary Whitaker. 4 passengers, 1 booking reference. The airline logo at the top, the total paid at the bottom. My check number was written in blue ink on the corner, my own handwriting looping neat and careful. I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a retired librarian with good habits and better folders. But I know how to read fine print. That night, I slid my reading glasses down and reread every line of the terms and conditions I had printed weeks before. Non-refundable. Name changes allowed only with a fee. Travel credits issued to original form of payment. A delivery folder in my email held every message from the airline, time-stamped and saved. The day they actually flew, the house felt hollow. Morning light came in soft through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the carpet. I made myself oatmeal and added brown sugar the way Walter used to like it, even though I ended up pushing it around the bowl more than eating it. The TV in the corner played the local news, talking about gas prices and some city council meeting. On the coffee table, phone buzzed with more pictures. Emma with a flower in her hair, a plastic cup of orange juice on the tray table, a blurry sunset through the airplane window. On Jenna's Instagram story, someone had tagged her. "Family trip, you deserve it, girl. Time to relax without stresses." Without stresses. I put the phone face down on the table and listened to the ticking of the old wall clock. I'd bought that clock the year Mark started high school, when Walter picked up extra shifts, and I took on more hours to pay for football gear and yearbooks. The ticking had always comforted me. That morning, it sounded like it was counting something down. I am not a woman who screams or throws things. Grief taught me how wasteful that is. When Walter died, I learned that pain either eats you or it feeds something steadier in you, something that watches and remembers. So I sat at my kitchen table with the unpaid electric bill under the salt shaker and the Hawaii confirmation in its plastic sleeve, and I began to remember. I remembered whose name was on the deed with mine and how much of the down payment came from the account Walter left me. I remembered the text messages where Jenna had written, "You're our angel, Mary. We couldn't do any of this without you," when I co-signed their second car loan. I remembered the email from the travel agent thanking me for handling the family's payment and attaching the full invoice in my name. I picked up my pen, the same pen I had used for years to sign permission slips and field trip forms, and later hospice documents and funeral arrangements. My hand didn't shake as much as I expected. There was no shouting, no dramatic music, no thunder in the distance. Just a tired woman, a quiet house, a stack of papers, and a heart that had finally, gently reached its limit. If they wanted a life without burdens, I decided, they were about to get exactly what they asked for. The day after they left, I woke to the soft patter of rain against my bedroom window. It had that steady rhythm that makes you feel both comforted and strangely aware of your own breathing. I lay there for a moment, listening, letting the weight of the empty house settle around me. Their flight would be landing soon. They'd be stepping into warm Hawaiian air while I stared at gray clouds over Ohio. Still, I swung my legs out of bed and put on my robe, Walter's old flannel one, the one that still held a faint smell of cedar. I shuffled to the kitchen, half expecting to see Emma's little pink backpack by the door or hear Mark rummaging for coffee filters like he always did when he visited. Instead, the only sound was the drip, drip of last night's teapot on the rack. I poured myself coffee, carefully, because my hands weren't as steady before breakfast. Then I sat at the table where all of this had begun. The lemon-patterned cloth stared back at me like a witness. In front of me were the documents I had left out the night before. The airline invoice, the printed emails, the original booking confirmation. An old yellow highlighter rested beside them, its cap cracked from years in my purse. As I traced the lines with my finger, I remembered a very different morning, 40 years ago, when Mark was a little boy, and I found him hiding behind the garage after breaking a neighbor's window. He'd cried so hard, not from fear of punishment, but from the guilt of disappointing someone. Back then, my son had looked me in the eyes and told the truth, even when it trembled on his tongue. Now, the adult version of him had gone on a trip I paid for, all while pretending it wasn't mine to share. I sipped my coffee and pulled the phone closer. There were more pictures posted overnight, palm trees glowing under golden lights, Emma holding a stuffed dolphin, Jenna in a sundress with a caption about finally getting the peaceful vacation we deserve. Peaceful. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. My neighbor, Elaine, knocked lightly on my back door around 10. She always knocked softly, like she didn't want to disturb anything fragile. She was holding a small Tupperware of scones she'd baked. "Saw the suitcase by your door yesterday," she said as she came in, wiping rain from her sleeves. "Thought you were going somewhere." I felt something twist inside me, but I kept my face steady. "Plans changed," I said. She sat across from me, eyes drifting to the papers spread across the table. Elaine wasn't nosy, but good women know when another woman is carrying something heavier than she should. "You want to tell me what happened?" For a moment, I almost cried. Not because of Hawaii, not because of being left behind, but because someone finally asked. But instead, I took a breath and told her just enough. How they'd rearranged the trip, how Jenna called me a burden, how the plane left without me even though the seat had been mine. Elaine's face darkened with a quiet anger I rarely saw in her. "Mary, that's cruel." I shrugged, because shrugging was easier than letting my voice shake. People show you who they are when they think you won't push back. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Her nails were painted light pink, a color I used to wear when Walter was still alive. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the plastic folder. "I'm going to take care of myself," I said. "For once." After she left, the house felt different. Not empty, but ready. Ready for whatever came next. I put the documents back in order, sliding them into the folder like puzzle pieces that finally made sense when placed together. I pulled out a fresh notebook, the kind with a stiff blue cover, and wrote down every detail I could remember. Dates, payments, conversations, even the time on the microwave when Jenna called me a burden. My handwriting stayed calm and even. Before noon, I called the airline. Not to complain, no, I wasn't ready for that part yet, but to confirm what I already suspected. The woman on the phone was polite. She read through the booking history carefully. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "I see the reservation originally included 4 passengers. The payment was made in full from a single account in your name ending in 3147. The credits were issued back to that same payment method." "Thank you," I said softly. That's all I needed to know. When I hung up, the house was unbearably still, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. Maybe years. I wasn't plotting revenge. Not yet. What I was doing was simpler, quieter. I was gathering truth. And truth, I've learned, is the sharpest tool a person can hold. Sharp enough to cut lies cleanly, but also gentle enough to free someone from the ties that were suffocating them. Mark and Jenna thought they had left me behind. What they didn't realize was that sometimes being left alone is exactly where a woman finally finds her strength. That evening, the rain stopped, and the sky turned the pale lavender color Walter used to call forgiving light. I stood in the living room, watching it spill across the carpet, and for the first time since they left, I felt something inside me settle. Not peace, not yet, but clarity, like dust finally sinking to the floor. I walked to the hall closet and reached up to the top shelf. Behind an old winter hat was a small metal lockbox. Inside were things I rarely touched. Walter's watch, the deed to my house, the letter from the bank confirming I'd co-signed Mark's car loan, and a stack of receipts I'd kept out of habit. I'm a librarian by training. I keep records the way gardeners keep seeds, because you never know when you'll need to grow something new. I sat with those papers spread around me on the living room rug. The house smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish and the vanilla candle I'd lit earlier. Outside, the street lamps flickered on, one by one, as if they were keeping me company in my quiet work. I found the car loan documents first. My signature on page 2, right beside Mark's, dated 3 years ago. I remembered how proud he'd been of that car, how Jenna showed it off on Facebook like she'd bought it herself. I remembered promising myself I'd never mention the late payments I quietly covered, the times the bank called me because he'd missed another deadline. Next came the deed to my house. My name was printed bold and steady. His was smaller beneath it, added years later when he needed stability for a mortgage application. I had been glad to help then, glad to feel useful, but the truth was printed in black ink. This home was mine long before it was ever his. As I gathered the papers, a strange guilt pressed at me, not because of what I was doing, but because of how long I had ignored what should have been obvious. I had loved them with my whole heart, but I had also allowed myself to become invisible, useful, dependable, convenient, but invisible. Have you ever realized too late that you were being used? The question rose inside me like a whisper, and I felt it settle heavy in my chest. My phone buzzed just then. A video call from Hawaii. I hesitated before answering, smoothing my hair even though no one cared how I looked. When I picked up, Jenna's face filled the screen, bright sunlight behind her. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Mary. Just wanted you to see Emma swimming." She turned the camera, showing my granddaughter splashing in a turquoise pool. My heart softened despite everything. Love doesn't disappear on command. When Emma saw me, she waved wildly, yelling, "Grandma, look, I can float." I clapped and cheered. I meant it. But behind my smile, I felt something shift. A quiet, steady resolve. Then the camera swung back to Jenna. "Hope you're relaxing at home," she said. "This trip would have been exhausting for you." Exhausting. Burden. All those words they kept choosing for me. "I'm doing just fine," I replied, my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. After she hung up, I sat there with the phone in my lap and the documents beside me. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't thinking about punishment. What I felt was something deeper, like the slow, certain turning of a tide. I stood, gathered the papers, and placed them neatly back into the lockbox. Then I took out my small spiral notebook and wrote a single sentence on a clean page. I deserved to be treated with respect. The words looked almost too simple, yet they glowed on the page like a small lantern. That night, I didn't sleep right away. I lay awake listening to the refrigerator hum, to the low creaks of the settling house, to the wind brushing the siding. And in that stillness, a new thought came. Not dramatic or fiery, but steady and grounded. I could choose what happened next. For the first time in a long while, that choice belonged to me. The next morning, Sunlight streamed through the blinds in thin golden stripes, the kind that warm the air just enough to make the house feel lived in, even when no one else is there. I made myself toast, buttered it slowly, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open. The list of quiet truths I'd written the night before rested at the top of the page, and below it, more thoughts began to gather. Small, steady realizations that felt like stepping stones across a river I'd ignored for too long. Around 10, I drove to the bank. My old Buick rattled a little, as it always did when turning into the parking lot, but I didn't mind. The familiarity of it grounded me. Inside, the bank smelled faintly of paper and carpet cleaner. Strange how such a simple scent can anchor a person. A young teller with a name tag that read Samantha smiled politely. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I need some account statements," I said. "For the last 6 months." She printed them while I waited. The machine clicked and hummed, spitting out pages of numbers that revealed more than either Mark or Jenna had ever said aloud. Transfers I'd made to help them just this once. Payments I'd covered, deposits that never got repaid. Each line was a memory I'd pushed away at the time, telling myself family mattered more than money. But sitting in that quiet bank lobby, I finally admitted something. Generosity only works when it's met with gratitude, not expectation. When Samantha handed me the stack of papers, I slid them into my folder. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. She had no idea she'd just handed me the clearest mirror of my last few years. On the way home, I passed the park where I used to push Emma on the swings. I slowed the car and watched a grandmother gently buckle her grandson into a stroller, her face soft with that mix of love and responsibility. I felt a tug in my chest, not jealousy, just a yearning for the version of my life where I was invited, included, wanted. Back home, I made tea and spread all the documents across the dining table, the flight receipts, the car loan papers, the bank statements. It looked almost like I was preparing for a research project. Old habits from the library never fade. When in doubt, organize. As I lined up the pages, the doorbell rang. I startled slightly. Unexpected company always unsettles me. When I opened the door, it was Mr. Lawson, the postal carrier who'd worked this route since Walter was alive. "Morning, Mrs. Whitaker," he said, handing me a small padded envelope. "Looks like it's from the travel agency." My eyebrows lifted. "Thank you." He tipped his hat and continued down the walkway, while I closed the door and carried the envelope to the table. Inside was a printed itinerary from the original booking and a note from the agent apologizing for the confusion regarding name changes. It included a detailed log, time-stamped, showing exactly when the reservation had been altered and by whom. There it was, clear as the sky over Honolulu. The call had been made from Mark's phone, not mine. The credits were issued back to my account. And the reason listed for the change? Passenger unable to travel. I let the paper fall gently to the table. My chest tightened. Not with anger, not anymore, but with something far heavier. The realization that they had counted on my silence. Counted on me not asking questions. Counted on me loving them more than I cared about myself. A small laugh escaped me. Sad, tired, but real. Because they still didn't understand something essential. I loved them enough to help them, but I also loved myself enough to know when the helping had to stop. In the afternoon, I called an attorney's office. Not to file anything, not yet, but to schedule a consultation. The receptionist sounded surprised when I asked for the earliest appointment. "Tomorrow at 9?" she offered. "That works," I said. After hanging up, I stood for a long moment by the window, watching the street outside. Children rode bicycles, a dog barked somewhere down the block, and the world continued calmly, as if to reassure me there was space for new beginnings, even at 66. My phone buzzed on the counter. Another picture from Hawaii. Mark holding a cup of shaved ice, smiling too wide as if he knew something was wrong but didn't want to name it. I stared at his face, the boy I raised hiding behind the man he'd become. I whispered into the quiet room, "You should have told me the truth, sweetheart." Because truth doesn't break families. Silence does. The attorney's office sat in a modest brick building just off Main Street, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and copier toner, and a small fountain bubbled quietly in the corner, its gentle sound steadying my nerves. I checked in at the front desk, smoothing the wrinkles in my skirt. The receptionist, a polite young man named Daniel, offered me a cup of water and gestured toward a row of soft chairs. "Ms. Whitaker, Mr. Grant will see you shortly." I nodded, folding my hands in my lap. My heart thumped, slow but firm, like it wanted to remind me this moment mattered. Not because I was preparing for a fight, but because for the first time in years, I was choosing myself without apology. Mr. Grant, a silver-haired man with kind eyes, led me into his office. He motioned for me to sit and waited patiently as I placed my folder, my little archive of quiet truths, on the desk between us. "How can I help you today?" he asked. I took a breath. "I need some information," I said, "about what my rights are, financially and legally, regarding my home, my accounts, and a situation that's come up with my family." He didn't interrupt. That alone made me feel steadier. So I opened the folder and began explaining, as calmly as I could, everything that had happened. The trip I paid for, the last-minute changes, the credits returned to my account without my consent, the comment about being a burden, the years of loans and payments I'd quietly covered. When I finished, he adjusted his glasses and looked at the documents closely. "First," he said, "you should know you've kept meticulous records. That will help you with anything you decide to do." Meticulous. Walter used to use that word for my recipe cards. Mr. Grant continued, "Your name is primary on the home. The co-signing agreements give you certain protections, and these financial statements show a significant imbalance in contribution. You're not here accusing them of a crime, so I understand that. But you do have the right to set limits, to protect your assets, to ensure no further obligations fall on you without your approval." Limits. The words settled over me like a soft blanket, comforting, overdue. He walked me through everything gently. How to remove myself from financial responsibilities that weren't mine. How to freeze unnecessary access to my accounts. How to adjust the deed status if I ever chose to. How to document communication going forward. He never pushed. He simply handed me tools I hadn't known were available. "You're not trying to punish them," he said quietly. "You're trying to preserve your peace." I felt my eyes warm, but I blinked the tears back. "Yes," I whispered. "That's all I want." When we finished, I thanked him and stepped out into the parking lot. The morning sun was brighter now, warming the pavement, and for a moment I just stood still, letting the air fill my lungs. I wasn't shaking anymore. On the way home, I stopped for groceries. Simple things: bread, apples, tea. At the checkout, the clerk, a girl who couldn't have been more than 20, smiled and said, "I like your earrings. My grandma wears ones like that." I touched the small gold hoops. Walter gave them to me for our 30th anniversary. "Thank you," I said. "They've been with me a long time." Back home, I put the groceries away and sat down with my notebook. My handwriting moved more confidently now, the loops smoother, the lines straighter. I wrote down every piece of advice the attorney had given me, not because I planned to act immediately, but because clarity is a kind of strength, and I wanted mine in writing. Later that afternoon, I opened my banking app and carefully, not angrily, not impulsively, adjusted the transfer permissions that gave Mark access. I didn't block him. I didn't close anything. I simply tightened the borders of my life back into my own hands. The house felt different after that. Not louder, not quieter, just mine. My phone buzzed around sunset. A text from Mark. "Mom, everything okay? Haven't heard from you?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to soothe anyone else's worry before considering my own. Finally, I typed back, "I'm well. Hope you're enjoying your trip." Nothing more, nothing less. No explanations, no apologies, no offering myself in the space between his questions. I set the phone down and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The sky outside turned a soft coral, fading gently into blue. The house still held its familiar creaks, the same ones Walter used to name ghosts settling into their chairs, he called them, jokingly. And for the first time since the plane left without me, I felt something warm bloom inside my chest. Not revenge, not triumph, self-respect. A quiet return to myself. That night, I sat on the couch with only the lamp beside me lit, its amber glow softening the room. The attorney's words echoed quietly in my mind, not harsh or demanding, just truthful, like someone finally adjusting a picture frame that had hung crooked for years. I felt calmer than I expected, grounded in a way I hadn't felt since before Walter fell ill. But calm has a strange way of sharpening memories. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I found myself replaying moments I'd long tucked away. The missed Thanksgivings, the last-minute cancellations, the times they asked for help with just one more bill, always promising they'd pay me back. The subtle glances Jenna gave Mark whenever I asked a question they didn't want to answer. It wasn't one moment that hurt. It was the slow accumulation, like dust settling on a shelf until one day you finally see the outline of everything you neglected to clean. Have you ever felt something like this? That strange ache of realizing you weren't valued as much as you valued others? I closed my eyes and breathed through it. I wasn't going to drown in memory. I had spent years doing that after Walter passed, floating through rooms filled with his things, his voice still echoing in my head whenever I reached for a light switch or folded laundry the way he'd teased me for. Losing him had taught me one thing. No one comes to save you from sorrow. You save yourself by standing up, inch by inch, even when your knees shake. The next morning, I found myself moving with purpose. I gathered all the paperwork into a clean accordion folder and labeled each section with neat librarian precision. Not because I planned to use it immediately, but because order brings peace, and peace was something I could finally choose. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. Pictures from Hawaii. This time it was a video. Emma twirling in a grass skirt on some sunny patio, while Mark laughed behind the camera. My heart squeezed at the sight of her joy. Children shouldn't carry the weight of adult failures. I watched the video twice, then set the phone face down. 10 minutes later, another notification popped through. This one wasn't cheerful. It was a text from Jenna. "Hope everything is good at home. You seemed distant on the call yesterday." Distant. A word people use when someone stops giving what they were never entitled to in the first place. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stepped outside onto the porch. The late afternoon breeze smelled of cut grass and warm pavement. Neighbors' kids rode scooters down the sidewalk, their laughter echoing off the houses. I let the sound wash over me. Inside, the phone buzzed again. Another message from Jenna. "Mark thinks maybe you're upset about the trip. We only did what was best for everyone." What was best for everyone except me? I finally typed back. "I'm taking some time for myself. We can talk when you return." No explanation, no attempt to soften the truth. Just a simple statement of boundaries, something I should have practiced long ago. Half an hour later, my landline rang. I don't get many calls on it anymore, so the sudden ring startled me. When I answered, a familiar voice spoke, one I hadn't heard in years. "Mary, it's Linda Hawkins, from the library." I blinked in surprise. Linda had been my supervisor back when I still shelved books and ran Children's Story Hour. She'd retired 2 years before I did. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," she said warmly. "I'm organizing volunteers for the annual community book fair. Your name came up. Everyone misses your energy." My energy. Imagine that. Someone who still thought of me as someone who had something to give, not something to carry. "I'd love to help," I said, before I could overthink it. And I meant it. For the first time in weeks, maybe longer, I felt wanted, appreciated, seen. After we hung up, I sat at the table and let the moment settle. My life didn't have to shrink because someone else couldn't see my worth. I could expand in new directions, make new routines, meet new people, rediscover parts of myself that had gone quiet from lack of use. The sun dipped low, filling the kitchen with a warm peach glow. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in front of the sink, watching the light shift across the counter. Then, without planning to, I whispered into the empty room, "I'm not a burden." The words didn't tremble. They didn't break. They simply rang true. And that quiet truth felt like the beginning of something larger, something steady and deeply mine. The next morning began with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't dramatic, just a soft, steady feeling beneath my ribs, like someone had opened a window inside me. I brewed coffee and let the aroma fill the kitchen. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a place I was returning to, piece by piece. I spent a few hours helping Linda coordinate the book fair. We spoke on speakerphone as I sorted through the old boxes in my hallway closet, leftover supplies from my library days, laminated name tags, storytime puppets, a stack of colorful bookmarks I'd forgotten I still had. Holding them made something warm unfurl in me. I remembered the children who used to rush into the reading corner, how their eyes lit up when I opened a new book. It felt good to recall a time when I knew exactly who I was. "You always had a gift with people," Linda said at one point, "especially the ones who needed gentleness." Her words caught me by surprise. My own family rarely described me that way anymore. They spoke of what I could do for them, not who I was. After lunch, I decided to run a few errands. The grocery store was quiet, the midday lull. I picked up ingredients for a small dinner, fresh vegetables, a piece of salmon, lemons. It felt nice to shop for myself rather than rushing for someone else's needs. At the checkout, the cashier asked if I wanted to donate $1 to the Children's Literacy Fund. I smiled. Of course. When I stepped back into the parking lot, the sun was warm, a soft breeze brushing my cheek. I paused beside my car, letting the moment sink in. I had spent so long shrinking my world to fit other people's expectations. Now it was expanding again, slowly, gently, like a flower opening in early spring. Back home, I found a voicemail from Mark. His voice sounded strained, as if he'd rehearsed what to say. "Mom, hey, I just wanted to check in. You're being quiet, and it's worrying me. Can you call me?" For a moment, guilt nudged at me, a familiar visitor. But it slipped away when I remembered the documents on my table, the patterns that had repeated for years, the trip they'd justified by calling me a burden. Still, hearing his voice tugged at old strings. He was my son, the little boy who used to fall asleep against my shoulder after reading Goodnight Moon. Love doesn't disappear, even when respect is lost. I didn't call him back. Not yet. Not until I knew I could speak without folding myself back into the small shape they preferred. Instead, I spent the afternoon cleaning out the sunroom. Dust motes drifted through the beams of light as I opened old drawers and rediscovered forgotten things. Walter's sketchbook, the sewing kit I used to patch Mark's jeans, scraps of fabric from Emma's first Halloween costume. Every object reminded me that I had lived a full, generous life. I wasn't just someone's helper. I wasn't meant to be hidden behind their needs. Just before sunset, the doorbell rang. It startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my neighbor Elaine stood on the porch with 2 cups of hot cocoa. "I made extra," she said, "and I had a feeling you could use some company." We sat together on my porch swing, sipping cocoa as the sky shifted from rose gold to indigo. Cars rolled slowly down the street. Porch lights clicked on one by one. It all felt wonderfully ordinary and grounding. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Elaine said softly. "About the trip, about them leaving you behind. You didn't deserve that. You know." I swallowed, feeling the warmth of the mug seep into my palms. "I know," I whispered. "I'm just learning to say it out loud." "You're stronger than you think," she told me. "I've always seen that in you." Her words reached a place inside me I hadn't realized was still tender, not because they were new, but because it had been so long since someone said them. After she left, I lingered on the porch, listening to the cicadas hum in the trees. The evening air cooled around me, carrying the faint scent of honeysuckle from the neighbor's yard. I wrapped my sweater tighter and looked at the quiet street. My street. My home. This was the life I had built, not the life someone else borrowed. I walked inside, turned off the porch light, and closed the door behind me with a sense of certainty. The kind that comes when a woman finally sees herself clearly again. And in that still moment, as the night settled around me, I understood something simple but profound. I was no longer waiting for them to come home. I was finally coming home to myself. The next day began quietly, the kind of quiet that doesn't weigh on you, but lifts gently like a curtain. I moved through the morning slowly, brushed my hair, watered the plants scattered around the sunroom, let the radio play its soft oldies while I tidied up. For once, nothing felt rushed or overshadowed by someone else's needs. The house, in all its ordinary shapes and sounds, felt truly mine. I spent part of the afternoon preparing for the community book fair. I unpacked my old Storytime puppets and wiped the dust from their button eyes. There was Harold the rabbit, whose ear I'd sewn back on countless times, and Millie the mouse, whose tiny felt paws always made children laugh. Holding them made me feel like a different version of myself, one who carried joy as easily as breath. Around 3, I drove to the community center to drop off a box of supplies. The place buzzed with volunteers taping signs, stacking tables, and sorting donated books. Linda waved me over, her bright scarf blowing a little in the breeze from the open door. "There she is," she said. "Everyone, this is Mary. She practically built the children's section at the library." I felt my cheeks warm, but not from embarrassment, from something softer, almost forgotten. Recognition. Several volunteers smiled warmly. One woman, maybe in her 40s, said, "I brought my kids to your story time years ago. They still talk about that puppet show with the lost kitten." A surprising laugh escaped me. "Oh dear, the one where Harold's whiskers fell off mid-story?" "That's the one." For an hour, we worked together, packing goodie bags, labeling boxes, organizing the check-in table. My joints ached a little, but it was the good kind of ache, the kind that reminds you you're part of something. When I finally headed home, the sky was painted with soft streaks of peach and tangerine. When I walked through my front door, I noticed a small red light blinking on my landline machine. Another voicemail. My heartbeat quickened, though I wasn't sure why. I pressed play. "Mom, it's me." Mark's voice came through, quiet and uneven. "Jenna's worried. I'm worried. You're not saying much, and it feels like something changed. If we hurt you, just call me. Please." His plea sat heavy in the air. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. I didn't want to punish him. I didn't want him to hurt. But I also couldn't unhear burden. I couldn't unknow the truth in those documents, or unsee the choices they made when convenience mattered more than love. I walked into the kitchen, made myself a fresh cup of chamomile tea, and leaned against the counter. What would I even say if I called him back? The old me would have rushed to explain, soothe, mend. But that woman had carried too much for too long. I glanced at the folder on the table, closed now, resting quietly under my notebook. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't leverage. It was simply truth, organized and ready, like a quilt folded neatly at the foot of a bed. As the tea steeped, I found myself thinking about Walter again, not with that sharp pain I used to feel, but with a soft clarity. He'd always told me I had a backbone stronger than steel, even when I didn't believe it. "You keep this family together," he'd say, "but don't forget to keep yourself too." I hadn't kept myself for a long time. But I was learning. Just as I set the tea on the table, my phone buzzed, this time a text from an unknown number. I opened it, confused, until I saw the signature. Officer Riley, Oakview Police Dept. "Mrs. Whitaker, we received a request from you last year regarding fraud protection on your accounts. Just checking to confirm your contact information. No action needed unless you'd like to update anything." I blinked. That request had been something I filed after a small scam attempt the previous winter. A precaution. But the timing, it felt like a gentle nudge from the universe reminding me that I had already taken steps to protect myself long before this Hawaii trip ever happened. I saved the number, thanked him, and hung up feeling strangely steadier. The sun dipped behind the houses outside, casting soft shadows across the dining room. I sat down, wrapped my hands around the warm mug, and allowed myself a long, quiet breath. I wasn't finished with this journey. Not yet. There were still conversations to have, boundaries to draw, truths to be spoken without fear. But I no longer felt small or powerless. I felt present, whole, and ready for whatever came next, on my own terms. They came back on a Tuesday afternoon. I knew the exact moment their car turned onto my street. The familiar low rumble of the engine crawled up my driveway, and for a second, my heart did that old, foolish flutter. It always did when my boy came home. I was standing at the kitchen counter, hands dusted with flour from the blueberry muffins cooling on the rack. The house smelled sweet and warm, like all the years I'd spent trying to make everyone else comfortable but myself. I turned off the oven fan and listened to the crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of the car doors, Emma's high voice chattering about something in the driveway. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked at the dining table. Everything was ready. The accordion folder sat in the center, neat and closed. Beside it lay a slim stack of papers Mr. Grant had helped me prepare. A simple repayment agreement for the trip, a written notice about financial boundaries, and a summary of the changes I'd already made to my accounts. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel, just truth, in ink. That morning, before they arrived, I'd driven to the police station on Oakview. The building was small and square, with a flag lifting lazily in the breeze. Inside, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Officer Riley, the one who'd texted me about my fraud protection note, met me in the lobby. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, offering a polite nod. "You wanted to talk about your accounts?" We sat at a metal desk under the watchful eye of a security camera in the corner. I told him calmly what had happened with the airline credits, the changes made without my consent, the financial pattern that had built up over the years. I made sure to say it clearly. I wasn't pressing charges. I wasn't accusing anyone of a crime. I just wanted my concerns documented. He listened carefully, tapped a few notes into his computer, then slid a printed form toward me. "This is a voluntary statement," he said. "It won't trigger anything by itself, but it creates a record. If you ever feel pressured, or if money goes missing without your consent, you'll have this on file. And if anyone ever tries to use your accounts without permission again, call us. You're not overreacting." Not overreacting. The words went down easier than my coffee. I signed the statement with a steady hand. Walking out, I noticed my reflection in the glass door. I looked smaller than I felt, just an older woman with her purse tucked close. But my shoulders were straight. Now, back in my kitchen, I heard the front door open. "Mom," Mark called out. "We're here." His voice had that bright edge people use when they're hoping everything is normal. I walked to the hallway, wiping my palms one more time on the dish towel. They stepped inside in a rush of luggage wheels and airport smells, recycled air, sunscreen, something sweet and artificial. Jenna wore a pale blue sundress, her skin bronzed, hair pulled into a loose, effortless knot. Emma ran straight to me, arms wide. "Grandma," she squealed, "I brought you a shell." She pressed a small white shell into my hand, warm from her pocket. My throat tightened. I bent down and kissed her cheek, breathing in the salt and lotion smell of her. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "Thank you, sweetheart." Over her head, I saw Mark watching me. His smile was too quick, too bright, hiding something. Jenna hovered beside him, scrolling through her phone, then slipping it into her bag. "We had an amazing time," Mark said, trying to sound casual. "Hope you've been okay. House looks good." "I've been fine," I answered. "Come into the dining room. I baked muffins." Their faces relaxed a little at that. Habit, I suppose. I've always been the woman with something warm on the table. They followed me in, Emma already reaching for a plate. "Can I show Grandma my pictures?" she asked. "In a bit, honey," I said gently. "I need to talk to your mom and dad first." I'd already set up the old DVD player in the living room with one of Emma's favorite movies. While the opening credits of the cartoon rolled, I settled her on the couch with a muffin and a glass of milk. She didn't complain. Children accept what's in front of them so easily. When I came back to the dining room, Mark and Jenna were standing by the table, looking at the folder like it was something radioactive. "What's all this?" Jenna asked, forcing a small laugh. "Just some things we need to go over," I replied. "Have a seat." They sat. I took the chair opposite, the folder between us like a clear line in the sand. I asked my attorney, Midar Grant, to be available by phone, I said calmly. "He'll join us in a few minutes." Jenna's eyes widened a fraction. Mark shifted in his seat. "Mom, an attorney? Isn't that a bit much?" I folded my hands on the table. The lemon-patterned cloth between my fingers felt familiar, grounding. "I don't think it is," I said. "Not after what happened." I opened the folder. The papers made a soft whispering sound, like the start of a book being read. I slid the printed itinerary toward them first. The original booking, their names, my name, the total paid from my account. "This is the trip confirmation I received," I said, "the one that showed 4 passengers. Do you remember this?" Mark swallowed. Jenna didn't speak. I placed the travel agent's log beside it. "This is the record of the call made from Mark's phone to change the booking. The credits were returned to my account. The note says, 'Passenger unable to travel.' No one asked me if I was unable." Silence settled heavy between us. Next, I set down the bank statements. Highlighted lines showed transfers. payments I'd covered, months I had quietly stepped in. Finally, the car loan document, my signature next to Mark's, the missed payments that had bounced back to me. I went to the bank, I said. I went to the airline. I've spoken with an attorney. I've spoken with the police just to document what's been happening. I haven't filed any charges. I don't want to, but I will not pretend I don't know what's been done with my money and my trust. Mark's face had gone pale under his tan. Mom, this is blown out of proportion. We were going to pay you back. The trip, Jenna just thought. Jenna cut in, voice sharpening. We thought it would be easier on you, less stress. You get tired, you've said so yourself. And we used your credits, yes, but they were from your account. It's all the same in the end. It isn't, I said quietly. Not when decisions are made about me without me. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. I put it on speaker. Hello? Mr. Grant's steady voice filled the room. Mary, can you hear me? Yes, I can. You're on speaker. My son Mark and his wife Jenna are here with me. Good afternoon, he said mildly. Thank you for joining Mark and Jenna. I understand there has been some confusion over financial matters and a recent trip. Jenna's jaw tightened. Is this necessary? It is, I replied. For me. Mr. Grant spoke calmly, like he was explaining library rules to a room of restless children. He outlined in simple terms what consent means in financial arrangements, how using someone's funds and credits for personal benefit without clear permission can border on fraud, how repeated patterns of unpaid debts and silent expectations create risk for the person whose name is on the accounts. I want to be clear, he finished. Your mother has expressed that she does not wish to take criminal action. She wants to set boundaries and formalize protections moving forward. That is her right. Mark rubbed his forehead. Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you, he said, voice strained. We just thought it would be too much for you, traveling, the time zone. We told ourselves we were doing you a favor. Calling me a burden had been quite a favor. I looked at my son carefully. He couldn't hold my gaze for long. This isn't only about Hawaii, I said. It's about years of you assuming I would take care of whatever you couldn't or didn't want to handle. Bills, loans, childcare. And I did. Because I love you. But love and being used can start to look very similar if no one draws a line. Tears shimmered in Jenna's eyes now, though whether from guilt or fear I couldn't tell. So, what happens now? She asked. Now, I said, we become honest with each other. I slid the simple agreement forward. Mr. Grant had written it in plain language. This outlines a repayment plan for the amount I paid toward the trip, I explained. Small monthly installments. Nothing that will ruin you, but enough that you feel the weight of what was taken. It also states that I will no longer co-sign loans, cover late payments, or allow anyone access to my accounts without written permission. If that boundary is crossed again, I will treat it as what it is, financial abuse, and I will act accordingly. Financial abuse? Mark repeated, stunned. Mom, that's harsh. It's accurate, I answered softly. I am not calling you abusers. I am saying the pattern must stop before it becomes something none of us can come back from. For a long moment, no one spoke. The refrigerator hummed. A car drove by outside. In the living room, I could faintly hear Emma's movie turning to a song she liked to hum. Finally, Mark reached for the pen. His hand shook as he signed. Jenna followed, lips pressed into a thin line, tears on her cheeks now. When they were done, I signed my name at the bottom. Mr. Grant confirmed he'd prepare a scanned copy for everyone. Then he said something that surprised me. Mary, I'd like to commend you, he said. It's not easy to stand up for yourself with family. But in my experience, this is how respect begins, by telling the truth calmly and backing it with action. Thank you, I murmured. After the call ended, the room felt smaller. Mark stared at the papers, then at me. So, he said hoarsely, is this it? You're just cutting us off? I shook my head. I'm not cutting you off from my heart, I said, but I'm closing the tap you've been drinking from without looking at the well. Jenna looked like she might argue, then seemed to think better of it. She stood abruptly. I'll go sit with Emma, she muttered, leaving the room. That left my son and me at the table, with the lemon cloth and the signed pages between us. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I really am. I believe you, I said. But I also believe what people do more than what they say, so I'll be watching what you do next. He nodded, eyes wet. For the first time in a long time, I saw the boy he used to be, standing by the broken window, confessing through tears. But this time, I didn't rush to fix it for him. I let the lesson sit where it belonged. Later, after they left, with their shell gifts and their silence and their signed agreement tucked into Jenna's handbag, I walked through the quiet house. The sun was lowering, painting faint gold on the walls. I picked up the little shell Emma had given me and turned it over in my palm. It was chipped on one side, but still beautiful. My heart hurt. Of course it did. Drawing boundaries doesn't numb you. It doesn't erase the ache. It simply keeps you from bleeding out. In the stillness of my kitchen, with documents filed and the pen finally capped, I felt something new settle in beside the grief. Not victory. That isn't what this was. It was dignity, hard-earned, long delayed, finally claimed. A few days passed before the house finally felt steady again. The air wasn't heavy anymore, and I wasn't moving through the rooms waiting for an echo of someone else's footsteps. I woke each morning with a clearer rhythm. Coffee, a slow walk through the garden, sunlight warming the tops of my hands as I checked the tomato plants I'd nearly forgotten to tend. My life hadn't become louder, just fuller, in a way that made sense. The Saturday of the book fair arrived bright and breezy. When I walked into the community center, carrying a box of bookmarks, the room buzzed with voices and laughter. Tables overflowed with gently used novels and children's books with curled corners. Kids darted between aisles holding comic books like treasure. Mary! Linda called, waving me over. We saved the story corner for you. I felt that familiar flutter. Nervous, excited, grateful. The small rug in the corner was already laid out, with Harold the rabbit propped against a stack of picture books. As I settled onto the little wooden chair, children began gathering in front of me, their parents standing behind them. When I opened the first book, something inside me clicked back into place, like a latch that had been waiting to close. Their faces lit up, their giggles filled the air. My voice flowed warm and steady, as if all the parts of me that had been dimmed by years of being overlooked suddenly remembered how to shine again. After the reading, as families drifted off to browse, a woman around my age approached with her granddaughter. You have a soothing voice, she said gently. My husband used to read like that. It brings back good memories. Her words touched something soft in me. I smiled. It brings back good memories for me, too. By the time we finished cleaning up late in the afternoon, my feet ached in that satisfying way that tells you you've done something good with your time. I drove home with the windows cracked, letting the breeze cool my cheeks. The neighborhood glowed with the warm gold of early evening. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw a small figure sitting on the porch steps. Emma. Her legs swung back and forth, and she held a small paper bag in her hands. Mark stood a few feet away watching her, hands in his pockets. I got out of the car slowly, surprised. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? Emma ran to me. Daddy said we had to come say sorry. For real. My breath caught as she pressed the paper bag into my hands. Inside was a bracelet made of little seashells, uneven, fragile, strung together with bright blue thread. I made it, she said proudly. So you don't forget we love you. I knelt and pulled her into my arms, feeling her small heartbeat against my chest. I could never forget that. When she skipped back toward the porch, Mark stepped forward. His face was tired, but honest in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot. You were right, about everything. I should have protected you, not taken advantage of you. I'm ashamed of how blind I was." The wind rustled the maple leaves overhead, scattering tuft of shadows across the porch. "I don't need grand promises," I told him. "Just follow through. Respect and honesty." He nodded, eyes shining. "You'll have it, starting now." I believed him, not blindly, not foolishly, but cautiously. Hope isn't a weakness when it comes with new boundaries. Later, after they left and the porch light flicked on automatically, I sat alone on the steps with the seashell bracelet in my lap. The night air was cool, carrying distant sounds of laughter from a neighbor's backyard. I traced the shells with my fingertips, each one reminding me how fragile things can still hold strong when they're tied together with care. My life wasn't perfect. My family wasn't healed in an instant. But something important had shifted. I had reclaimed the part of myself that had gone quiet. I had found my voice not in anger, but in truth, and that truth had changed the ground we all stood on. As the stars blinked awake overhead, I whispered into the quiet. Respect is not something you're given. It's something you claim. Thank you for walking this journey with me. And if my story touched you, I'd be grateful if you liked and subscribed to hear more. And tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done?